thought, well, if we'd been sitting 25 years ago predicting the future, we wouldn't have been even remotely right.
No.
It's just incredible where we sit. But I'm sitting here wondering, if I'm a conventional farmer and intensive farming is already very much the bad boy, are we looking at a situation where the Dutch experience is arriving for our farmers? In Holland, they've worked out a system where something like 3,000 they would class as intensive farmers have to go now, and there's another 8,000 at risk of being taken out of production purely and simply on supposed environment grounds. So obviously, when you started the organic transition, I was happily working with you, and I watched for 2 years. In fact, I think I spent 2 years trying to persuade you not to do it.
Yeah.
Actually, you had two options, didn't you? You were going to go into ice cream or organic.
That's
you made the wrong choice, obviously. But
obviously.
that's why I stopped visiting.
Yeah.
I was really looking forward to the ice cream. But the point is that transition is not easy.
No.
It asks for many things that most of us don't consider in terms of the soil, the productivity, how we manage the cows, and probably specifically the fact that those cows need an awful lot of out time. Now, I'd just be interested in what you think. Organic probably has a limited lifespan in the new world because everybody is going to be forced to exist without nitrogen, without phosphorus even. We're going to have to try and farm organically without the advantages of an organic milk price. So that's a lot of words from me. How do you feel?
Yeah, there are definitely challenges coming towards us, but, one thing I pick up on your comment earlier, reducing the amount of dairy and dairy products, to me, really people need to be looking at the nutrient density of food and the quality of that nutrient dense food that's actually being produced. So yes, I am a dairy farmer and have been so for the last 30 years. But at this moment in time, I think people think they can, live on veg and carbohydrates. And in reality, we need quality animal fats for our brains to function properly. So that to me, I'm a passionate dairy farmer and I'm aiming to be that, for my lifetime, basically.
Yes.
So we used to be, in those early days working with you, Colin, with the very high yielding cows, doing 12,000 litres per cow. And then business structure changed and we moved to organic. And certainly there were challenges through that time. And the biggest challenge at that time was the soils that we were working with had been conventionally farmed for sort of 30 years since the war. And an awful lot of nitrogen fertiliser had been thrown on these soils. And so when we actually got to Keithorpe Lakes Farm back in 1990, we were working with dead soils. And dead soils take an awful lot of inputs. And that's that's where conventional ag has been for a long time. And the problem is when you're using high levels of inputs and you've got a dead soil, you're actually producing empty calories. So I don't see that organic is necessarily utopia, because it is very limited in terms of inputs. And I think, the biological farming model is the model for the future in this country, definitely.
Yeah, I think if I recall rightly, I did end up coming to you after a couple of years of you being organic and asked you to pass me a plate so I could eat my words. Because quite clearly, I know it wasn't easy, but the difference was astonishing. And the difference was not just in the health of the fields. Remember, we used to walk those grazing paddocks?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that you did initially was address the calcium and the sulphur in particular.
Yeah.
And I noticed from my side of the industry that when it comes to analysis of be it silages or soils, to give you an example, we've been working intensively in slurry. It was a very uncomfortable day.
Yeah.
So we've worked intensively in slurry, and we were dealing with the major labs, and one or two of the results were coming back, and I was a little bit dubious.
Yeah.
It seemed like that either we're seeing too big a swing or not enough of a swing
Yeah.
in what we were doing. So I queried with them, and I said, look, there's something wrong here.
Yeah.
And they came back, and I promise you this is true. They said, yeah, but the analysis is plus or minus 20%.
Yeah.
And you go, right, in other words, it's useless.
Yeah.
Yes, fair enough. So you can then move that forward, and exactly what you're saying, part of what we do in the business side of affairs is try and remedy or identify problems.
Yeah.
It's what I've done for years as like a nutrition guy. You go to a farm because they've got problems with the cows or the milk.
Yeah.
And we had a call from a farm indirectly in Devon that was having really serious problems. The cows seemed to be all right grazing, but when they were housed and eating, there was real issues.
Yeah.
Now, part and parcel of what we did was we used analysis, and we used conversation, and we sort of looked back historically. But there was one key moment at which that farmer and the consultant he was dealing with said, well, last year we walked down the farm and we dug up a few plots.
Yeah.
And you know what? We only found one earthworm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you go, and you wonder where your problem is.
Yeah.
Because quite clearly you've got serious problem in the soil. And I think that, again, is whether you're organic or conventional. Organic has addressed the issue of soil, and exactly what you said, after decades of intensive slurry application, high levels of NPK, the imbalances in the soil are so bad that there was a government survey, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, and they made a sort of blanket statement, there's only 80 crops left in UK soils.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And you'd have thought at some point somebody might have said, well, that's possibly a bad thing to happen. Yeah. And instead we have Mr. Sunak advising farmers they need to grow some fruit. Good luck with that in Cumbria.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the UK is ideally suited to growing grass, and a lot of grass, and to utilise that grass effectively and turn it into high quality nutrition is with ruminants. Our soils at Keythorpe, we are a high calcium soil, so that's a big advantage because high calcium soils will tend to flocculate, and so the flocculation is allowing the air to get into the soil. If the soil can breathe, it's alive. If it can't breathe, you're ending up with subsoil. And we've been really challenged this winter and spring with these very wet soils.
Yeah, totally.
And so organically, we have to wait for those soil biology to repopulate in the spring. So it's quite a slow burn. So organic, conventional ag can throw nitrogen on, but it's not actually doing anything for soil health. Yes. And it's all about soil health, to produce high integrity feed. That's the basis that we need to be working in.
Absolutely. And again, you bring up a really important and critical point, which is that I believe the rainfall in the UK generally in the last 18 months is the highest ever recorded.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. I mean, technically, the water forces out the oxygen.
Yeah.
So you have a serious problem. The aerobic layer at the top is the one where the organic matter is broken down in the most beneficial way.
Yeah.
As you move down into the anaerobic layers, then it's equally possible for some of the organic material that's being broken down to become acidic or to produce volatile fatty acids that are actually harmful or negative to the microbial population. Now, that being the case, that would suggest that nearly every farmer in the UK right now is looking at quite a severe drop in the pH of his soil.
Yeah.
pH, we all understand, is the acidity of the soil, but it isn't on its own.
No.
There's other factors like pKa is the name. It's the strength of the acidity is different.
Yeah.
pH remarkably simply measures the hydrogen ion. I won't go into the technical, but basically what we're looking at is, speaking from the point of view of being married to a wonderful lady who's the best farmer I've ever met, second best farmer I've ever met.
You won't tell her that.
Oh no, she might see this. But there you go. The point is that over a period of time, you do the samples and you go, okay, our soil is not too bad. You know, we pH our bigger fields at 6.87, so we're quite happy with that. Did them again recently, 6.2.
Yeah,
that's the effect of that water.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned calcium. Calcium is critically important, but people ignore a couple of elements. Phosphorus, to start off, is absolutely fundamental to every energy process that occurs in the soil, in the plant, in the eventual consumption of that material into human or animal. It's part and parcel of energy. Therefore, phosphorus absorbed into the plant and its function in the plant is dependent on pH.
Yeah.
And if the pH of the soil even begins to move below 6.5, the availability and functionality of the phosphorus is decreasing.
Yeah.
That is going to have a direct effect. You used the term empty calories. That's absolutely bob on. You know, a silage analysis like my plus or minus 20 might give me a figure.
Yeah.
My cow is going to give me a totally different figure if it's
Yeah.
coming from interference. As somebody who's worked in nutrition for a lot of years, whenever I've seen molybdenum, my first thought is, oh no, molybdenum, copper, I've got a problem, potential. You know, they're going to tie the copper up, and etc., etc. But in truth, molybdenum is the key element in the nitrogenase enzyme that is involved using the phosphorus to bind up the nitrogen in forms that the plant can utilize. Yeah. So the plant is making itself and making its protein, not empty calories, by that molybdenum.
Quality amino acids. Yeah.
Quality. And then what you've got is this terrible situation. The pH is dropping, the molybdenum availability is plunging.
Yeah.
And now what we're trying to do is not only grow the plant, it can't do anything but make empty calories because it can't get the elements that are required to grow it and produce the viable material. As you remember, I used to own Agbag.
Yeah.
And with Agbag, one of the things that always flagged up when we did macro and trace element analyses was, for instance, in the 1980s and 90s, we would record without fail sulfur contents in grass of about 0.4.
Yeah.
By the time we come to the 2010s, we're recording 0.2s.
Yeah.
It's halved. That's, I think, as a result of the Clean Air Act.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah.
But the unintended consequence, the grass is now deficient in sulfur. And again, a phrase that you've just used somewhere down there is that if we look at sulfur per se, where's it coming from? What kind is it? Is it in a form that can be utilised or is it not?
Yeah.
And if you don't feed the soil the material that it can use, it hasn't got it. And then if you factor in the pH drop, then what you're doing is producing inert dead soil. It might grow stuff, but it's not growing nutrition.
No. So we at Keythorpe for a lot of years, we actually used gypsum for bedding in the cubicles, and gypsum is obviously calcium sulfate. So we were getting the product on farm.
I wonder where all the plasterboard had gone in your house, Will.
No. It was pure gypsum. Anyway, OFG don't like gypsum, so we're now betting on chalk. But the gypsum did an excellent job because actually we were buying on a product onto farm, for not too much money, and it was having a double effect. We were using it in the cubicles, so it was a dry calcium source with a knockdown of the bacteria with sulfur, and then that was going out in the slurry. So we were actually helping to hopefully lifting the protein content of our grass with the sulfur going out in the slurry using the gypsum. So that actually, that's a classic example of where you've got a byproduct that we're actually using on farm, very effectively. But now we're on chalk. But it's doing a similar job. It's not quite as good as the gypsum as we were.
Yeah, that surely was always going to be the case because it's like, again, in my world, some of the people that we're associated with, like originally Christian Hansen's, now Novonesis, these are the world's leading biotech companies.
Right. Yeah.
And they think there's nothing odd about the fact that they do a decade's research.
Yeah.
And they produce something marvellous.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. Right now
Yeah.
they're sitting on an organism, which literally you could apply as a seed dressing, and it'll increase the phosphorus availability in the soil subsequently by about 50%.
Right.
That's dynamite. Why the hell can't we have it?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is because it's in the regulatory chain
Yeah.
in Brussels.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
You know, organically, where, you know, as farmers we could do so much more, but it's regulation that's holding us back.
Yeah.
And you know, I think there's a lot of tech out there that would be really useful, give farmers back some of their efficiencies and profitabilities that could be used, and yet we're restrained at this moment in time by regulation.
Regulation is part and parcel of everything that we do.
Yeah.
And it's become almost nonsensical. Are we going to have inspectors to count our trees? Are we going to have... I noticed the other day the rather disturbing flagging up of another BSE case in Scotland.
Yeah, no, I saw that.
Yeah. And does that mean, again, somebody will take a precautionary measure and impose restrictions in movement? Often these things are knee-jerk reactions and they don't consider.
No.
You know, in the end, our job, which we are brilliant at, is in producing high-quality, nutritional food. Yeah. And it's not served us badly. It's sort of like, oh, you know, it's terrible. You need to go onto such and such a diet. And without being offensive on an individual basis, I did read a really interesting scientific study on veganism, which suggested that the average IQ drop in vegan fed from birth is about 3 to 5 points.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, in about 5 or 6 generations, they won't even be able to feed themselves. Problem solved.
Don't think we better go there, Colin.
Do you not think that's a solution?
No, we better not go there.
Apologies, vegans. I'm just having fun.
It does, you know, that study does highlight, you know, the point of the animal fats.
Yes.
And we all need quality animal fats for the neurons in our brain to function properly. Yes. And it does, you know, there are studies coming out now, and it does highlight some of the issues with empty calories or the wrong diet, or, you know, and maybe not a mix, you know, not the mixed diet that it should be. Yeah. And then you can take that to, you know, on farm and say, actually, the best farming system is the mixed farm, where you've got livestock and arable, and then you've got a holistic system that fits together, you know, and works as it should do, rather than, you know, just out there growing monocultures, you know, and these arable guys, you know, just with driving around in the tractors and combines, throwing on inputs, you know, and not really caring for the soil and growing empty calories. But that's my organic bit.
That's 100% agree with you. That's amongst other sort of considerations. You go with the fats, with everything that's concerned. It goes. Would you, given the choice, without the economic pressures, would you be happy with housing cows 24/7? And the answer is no. None of us would, probably. No. And so you look at the systems, and to a large extent, again, hopefully without offending anybody, I've saved that for one particular group. The idea is that if you're a conventional dairy farmer, you are hooked into a pricing system which pretty much most of your working life leaves you working for less than minimum wage. You're working ridiculous hours, and what you're getting out of it is the satisfaction of being a farmer. It's a great life. It's involves lots of fresh air and exercise, but as you may be able to tell, it's not something I've done personally for some considerable time. I've become a pie consumer. So anyway, the point here I'm trying to make is that if we take an ideal world, it would be something along the organic lines, hence biological, in which the cows spend most of their productive time at grass.
Yeah.
And the reason, obviously, with grass is if you start looking into what is the ideal consumption of omega-3 and omega-6, then grass-fed is that ideal consumption. And it's the ideal production of the milk that comes from it. So there's good sense in that. There's the sense that, again, for years, generally speaking, the trend has abated to some extent. People made bigger and bigger cows.
Yeah.
And so we ended up, I know when I started in the industry, which was sort of like pre-Roman, but it's sort of like, when I started, yeah. You didn't have a computer as such, but your calculator sort of said, right, I'm going to do a diet for an average Holstein cow.
Yeah.
And that average Holstein cow is 600 kilos.
Yeah.
Well, the cows are about 600 kilos now. It's sort of, I would say there's people that I've dealt with in the last decade where the average weight of the cows would be 750 to 800.
Yeah.
Big cows.
Well, that's, in a lot of ways, that's where I lost confidence in the high yielding system. Yeah. Because the cows were getting larger and larger. And, we had a cow, Belinda, and she peaked at 84 litres a day. Well, with 84 litres a day, she got a dry matter intake of about 35 kilos. And how on earth in the UK can I feed this cow just with grass silage, a bit of whole crop and some concentrate? And so it was a really, Belinda, I've had, it was a real defining moment in my dairy career when suddenly I got this cow doing 84 kilos a day, which was absolutely blew my mind. And she was actually working really hard. And okay, she lived to an old cow, but it was to me, it was a system where we were just pushing to the extremes, and maybe we weren't in that sweet spot of agriculture as where we should be, in terms of not only in terms of the farm, but in terms of the cow and the staff and the whole system. And I think that's, for me, that's really important. It's the holistic system and making it all work together.
That's really interesting again. And I presume the genetics in that cow didn't replicate anywhere else, or she did produce. I mean, was her fertility good? Was she?
So she actually, she was 84 kilos. Then she backed off to 76. She then came bulling about 4 months into her lactation. She didn't get in calf then, and we struggled to get her in calf. Whether that was because of that level of production, the ovaries had shut down, or whether, you're going back a long way now. It's 20. 20.
That's not a long way for some of us, Will.
It's a long time ago. So, the genetics there wasn't all the genomic testing in terms of fertility and the management traits measured and things like that. But she was in milk for over 400 days. So you could say, well, in that 400 day, sorry, it was more than that. It was 600 days. She was in milk for nearly 2 years. But in those 2 years, she'd averaged 42 litres a day. Which she ended up with 24,000, just under 25,000 litres of milk in that period of time. So, but it was a really defining moment. And at that point, that's when, soon after that, we changed the system to organic and thought, actually, there's a more sympathetic, optimised way of farming at Keythorpe Lake Farm. And so we went.
I mean, again, a conversation going back, I think, many years we had. Your Gold Cup winning year.
2 years.
Your Gold Cup winning year.
Yeah.
One of the things that you stressed was that I think your average dry matter intake was 27 kilos.
There was one winter, when we were getting close to 27 kilos. Which was on the cows. The heifer average there was sort of 24.5 kilos.
Still astonishing.
Yes, it was massive, but that that all came down to the quality of the forage that was going in there, and that was quality grass silage. Probably 35% dry matter grass silage, and also. You were saying about pH in the soil. I'm led to believe that most systems throughout the world want to be running at about 6.7.
Yes.
That is the sweet spot in terms of pH. Since we've been organic, our pHs have plateaued at 6.7 on farm, and we don't really need to put much lime on at all now. But speaking to some farmers, and some farmers will just be looking at the pH, but actually they're not looking at the Cal-Mag ratio.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the magnesium can actually spike the a higher pH as well, and so you can actually be short of calcium in the soil because there's too much mag there.
Yeah.
So for me, the starting point for any farmer is to know your base saturation levels and your calcium and magnesium ratios on farm, so that those soils actually work. And
100% again, Will. That sort of flags up so much when you start looking into whether it's biological, organic farming, or real good, genuine research, when it's the interaction between many of the elements that's important, and the changes that occur both naturally, rainfall, etc., and induced by intensive farming systems. Our climate, somebody once said to me, is one of the best in the world for growing grass.
Yeah.
So we should grow grass.
Yeah.
Which is right. But again, just going back to your many years of Gold Cup winning.
Yeah.
Could we just revisit? So you made some. Did you cut particularly young on the silage that year? Was it sort of ear emergent or leaf? Or
we've always targeted between 67 and 70% D value, that is digestibility, and that's you can go with a higher digestible grass silage, but actually your throughput through the cow can sometimes be challenged, and then your ADF and NDF levels aren't high enough to actually get that cow ruminating. So when you go to the very, very high D value grass silages and concentrate, if you haven't got your NDF in there, well, you're feeding a cow more like a pig rather than a ruminant, which is what she is. So it's like any of these things, there is a sweet spot, and so I don't like to see seed heads, but I don't mind seeing the first seed coming out of the top of the grass. So and at that point you're probably your 68, 69D, which I feel is the sweet spot. But it's really important, and there have been guys making silage already this spring, and there just hasn't been the sunshine, and I'm thinking, guys, just give it a chance. Let it turn the right colour before we go in there mowing it. And then in terms of grass silage making, we'll mow it, we'll turn it straight out, because transpiration rates are really high in the first 12 hours, and then they start dropping off. So if you're going to make wilted silage, you need to turn it pretty much straight away, depending on ground conditions underneath, obviously. Pick it up within 24 to 36 hours. 36 hours really is the optimum for us. And then we do use the silage additive, because it's such high value feed that what we don't want is any deterioration in the clamp, and also losses in the clamp, because you can see big losses in clamp if there's too much air in there, or the sugars aren't high enough, or the pH doesn't drop quickly enough, you can see massive losses in your clamp. And so you've taken all that time to grow the grass, and you've just it needs looking after well.
I often sort of, because I am deep involved, as you know, in the microbiology of silage, and one of the things that strikes me, there's a lot of people who've moved to multi-cut systems. And with multi-cut systems, when it was first sort of mooted or proposed to me, I was a bit negative. I was thinking, precisely from what you're saying, if you're producing material that's all leaf, then you're probably at greater risk of dry matter losses, because the structural element is lower. If you are multi-cutting, then I can see how, if you're in the mid-30s of dry matter, it's okay. But one of the things, again, about acidity in silage that it never shows on an analysis, but the thing that we call buffering capacity. And technically that's the ability to withstand pH change. And over the years, as I was saying with ag bags, we used to go, 0.4% sulfur, that's normal. And now we see 0.2. One of the things that's changed in the opposite direction is potassium. And so we'll often see now potassium in silages that should be somewhere between 2.5%, and you'll see 3.5.
Yeah.
It's even higher. And
do you think that's a problem in the soil on farm, or is that?
I think it's cumulative. I think
Yeah.
it's slurry, and I think it's just the way it's managed.
Yeah.
And again, you always need to consider mineralization and immobilization, what's available and what isn't, and how they interact.
Yeah.
But the point is this: potassium is very high buffering capacity.
Yeah.
So now when we're cutting young and we've got a much higher fraction,
Yeah.
then what we're looking at is a slightly alarming prospect of extensive fermentation.
Right.
And what you're looking at in a fermentation process is you're saying, okay, we're going to convert sugars, and here's a misnomer straight away. Sugars, we're going to convert sugars to lactic acid. And there are people who will tell you that's a really good thing. But it's not a really good thing if you're taking what's fundamentally glucose, sucrose, fructose, and you're converting it all to lactic acid.
Yeah.
And because the buffering capacity doesn't slow it down or stop it,
No.
what you're ending up with is a 3.6, 3.7 pH silage,
Yeah.
which is instant trouble for the cow.
Yeah.
And if that's combined with a very soft, rapidly chewable, rapidly degradable, then you're going to have, I mean, again, the Dairy Co years ago said 50% or more of UK cows have subacute ruminal acidosis at any one time.
Yeah.
Well, that's wrong.
Yeah, no.
You know, it's wrong. And it's we as farmers, we have a duty of care to those animals.
Yeah.
And it's like, why wouldn't you make the diet happy? And as I say, you've demonstrated more than anybody that you don't need to do that.
No.
You know,
No.
if you could, it's like if you can take a dairy herd and imagine a scenario in which a large part of their diet. So it's why somebody once said to me, you know, like with robots, that's the end of zero grazing. And I was thinking it should be the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, if we've got robots and they can't go to grass, then bring the grass to the robots, because there's far more in grass than there is in silage.
Yeah.
Forgive me. But that's the point.
Yeah.
Maximum nutrition. You mentioned dry matter loss.
Yeah.
And this is, again, another one of Colin's pet hobby horses.
Yeah.
Off we go.
Yeah.
So, dry matter losses. I had the joy and the pleasure of working with a lady called Dr. Nancy Henderson.
Right.
And often in life, we describe somebody who's a real expert as they wrote the book.
Yeah.
She did actually write the biochemistry of silage.
Right.
She was head of research at Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And just absolutely dedicated silage all her life, and the knowledge, expertise, even the sense of humour. She was just miraculous, wonderful. So that was Nancy. Anyway, she did a survey, and this was a proper weighed-in survey, and she said 27% of what starts in that field never reaches the cow. That's dry matter.
Yeah.
And you think, that's a staggering amount.
Yeah.
It's almost like saying to the, you know, I've ordered 20 tonne of cake, he's delivered it, just nip round the back and blow 5 tonnes straight in the mid and save me the trouble of feeding it to the cows. It's like, you know, that kind of economic loss
is phenomenal.
massive, crazy.
Massive. Yeah.
But then sort of going a step further, sometimes you stand in front of a silage pit.
Yeah.
And if you've got a group of farmers, you say, right, how much is in that pit?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how do you know, if it'll last or anything? Well, I'll know it hasn't lasted when I hit the wall. They always know how to wind people up.
Yeah.
But the point is this: you go, no, it's not 1,000 tonne.
No.
There's 1,000 tonne on paper, for instance.
Yeah.
But that 1,000 tonne is 25% dry matter.
Yeah.
That's 750 tonnes of water.
Yeah.
So you've got 250 tonnes of silage, haven't you? And no, you haven't.
No.
Because ash and indigestible fibre account for nearly half of what's left. So you've got 125 tonnes.
Yeah.
Can you really afford to lose 27% of that?
Yeah.
You can't.
No.
And it's like we need to take a slightly different consideration of what we expect from silage and what we expect from grass.
Yeah.
And again, you mentioned alkalage.
Yeah.
And we've had more than one conversation about, we both actually like the model of mixed farming.
Yeah.
And that's going to return, and it's going to return in a big way.
Yeah.
And it's going to be great for the industry.
Yeah.
So mixed farming. So alkalage, You were using a urea base.
Yeah, yeah, it was Dugdale's Home and Dry
Yeah,
back then,
yeah.
all those years ago. I
No,
don't know
good
whether it's still
product.
going, but
Good
it's,
product, and it does a
yeah,
good job.
yeah,
So,
urea urease, wasn't it? That's
yeah.
what it was.
And I
Yeah,
mean, what you're trying to do there is almost sort of take an alkalizing effect to
yeah.
restrict any
It was
fermentation.
almost a caustic wheat
Yeah,
effect,
yeah,
wasn't it?
it was. Yeah,
That's what they were trying to achieve, and I
so
think it did to a point.
it does,
Yeah,
and again, it's a good option
yeah,
within, but it does open up again. All those years ago, when we'd be looking at your triticale,
yeah,
one of the things that I found traveling in Europe, working for Christian Hansen's,
yeah,
um, for a short period of time, I stepped in to do the nutrition support for them in the microbial area.
yeah.
So I was going to countries like Switzerland,
Right.
and it's always you did it with your Nuffield. You go
Yeah,
to different countries and
yeah,
you see different ways that people do things,
yeah,
and it was like, what a revelation!
yeah. That's
They're doing what Will does. They're layering silage, not
yeah,
wedging it.
yeah, yeah,
And as we've moved forward now, and again, I suppose you'll be the same as me, there must be a slight irony about the fact that the kinds of grasses that we grow,
yeah,
that we double the diploid chromosome, and we're making much younger grasses.
yeah,
We miss the fact that when we make younger grasses, they're oilier.
yeah,
And we miss the fact that if we get grass cut in drought periods, it gets thick coatings of linoleic
yeah,
acid.
yeah,
So put that in a wedge,
yeah,
and because you cannot get equal pressure, what you're actually doing is inducing slippage.
yeah.
And so now, how many people do we meet who, my silage is slipping, my
Yeah.
silage is slipping?
There was a lot of this last year.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's okay. So there's clearly physical reasons, but there's
yeah,
also climate reasons. There's various other things with the breeding of the grass, but the methodology,
yeah,
out traditionally wedging,
yeah,
yeah, maybe people should start thinking about.
yeah, layering. Well, we always layer our silage
Yeah.
through, and it's part of that is to keep a consistent diet right through the winter.
I always thought it was because you just enjoyed my face when you revealed the face and said, right, what is it? And I had to guess 7 layers.
There we go. Back in the day
Yeah.
with lucerne and whole crop
Yes.
and all of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, we still layer the silage. Yeah, yeah,
Years ago, you were kind enough to invite me to do a talk at it was a very good event presentation that you'd organised, and you had a guest speaker from the US called Gary Zimmer.
yeah, Gary.
And Gary, I presume he was probably in his late 60s, early 70s
Yeah,
at that
early
point.
70s. Yeah,
Yeah, in his 70s. And basically what he did was describe biological farming, and that was hence
that's
at that point you'd gone organic. He was coming over, he was talking biological farming. Biological farming, I think, has all the advantages of organic farming because we're doing many of the same things, but as biological farmers we can work within the new science that's developing. And the new science is wonderful, Will. It's not just the microbiology, it's the category that you call biostimulants.
Yeah,
These are naturally occurring elements which can be introduced into the soil and the plant, which will do incredible things. They'll tell it what colour chlorophyll to make. They'll tell it what elements to absorb, how to knit them together. It's a case of like now we've got the soil with the roots damaged.
yeah,
We've got material that we can introduce into the soil that say to the plant, okay, quick, fix the root this way.
yeah,
And so we are marrying up things that nature has provided, but bringing them into the right environment for the soil. So biological farming to me looks great. For you, this again opens up another avenue. Do you consider it that way?
yeah, definitely. I tend to try and push to the front of the crowd almost. And you mentioned Gary Zimmer there. He was the one who actually I was fortunate to achieve. Gain a Nuffield scholarship, but it was Gary who really put it together for me because there are limitations of organic farming and also conventional farming. But as soon as we look at the overall biological system, and biology will always beat chemistry with the enzymes and things that are there, but it's a moving target. But now with the technology that is coming through, you know, that there are massive advantages to both sides.
Yes.
Not only the conventional guys, but hopefully the organic
guys,
sides as well.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know, we want efficiencies back on farm and money in a back pocket. Really, that's what we want.
Yeah. Okay, so we have seen the future and it works.
Crack on.